Moin moin and hello! Today I would like to give you a little update, and particularly I would like to talk about my preparations for the upcoming trip. So, first of all, I moved from the Netherlands back to Germany last week. I went back to my parents now for a couple of weeks until I'm gonna embark on my journey to Africa. So that's number one. Number two is I sold my bus, my beloved bus, after a couple of years, to finance my trip through Africa basically. First I had to put everything back in and repair it a little bit. I then also washed it, and eventually I managed to sell it in a couple of days only. Does anybody care about this? I don't know. Let's just get into it. So today I wanted to talk about my preparation for the upcoming trip, and I wanted to share with you a little bit what I have done in the last month and what I have prepared and how I prepared myself. First thing that I've done is obviously find out a route, and there are really 4 routes that you can take through Africa, and they differ on level of difficulty and maybe experiences you have to have as a traveler. The first trip that you can do is through Southern Africa, and that's what I've done 2 years ago. I went from South Africa through Zimbabwe to Zambia, over to Namibia, and back down to South Africa. I would say this route rather has a beginner level. You don't have to have that much experiences beforehand. You can organize everything on the go, so you can buy a motorcycle there, you can apply for the visas there. The only thing you really have to worry about is maybe the motorcycle. So if you buy a new one, then you also have to register it on your own name. And this can be a problem in South Africa if you are not staying in South Africa longer than 1 year. Because normally you have to have a working visa or a permit to stay in this country in order to register a motorcycle on your name. But once you have your bike, then you can do an easy trip. You can just get all your stuff and then drive through the countries within, I would say, like 2 months would be a good time to do this. So this is the first trip, the southern part of Africa. The second trip is what I'm doing currently. So you can either go from South Africa to Egypt or from Egypt to South Africa, the other way around, along the east coast of Africa. I would say this has rather a medium difficulty level. You have to have some experiences to do it, but a lot of people have done it before you, and a lot of people are doing it probably while you are doing it. So there's a lot of experiences you can build on and a lot of help you can get along the way. You will have the same problem as with the southern trip regarding your motorcycle. So you either have to ship it or bring it somehow to Egypt, but it's very expensive to buy a motorcycle in Egypt and then drive down, or to buy it in South Africa and then drive it north. And then there's one document in particular that you have to get. It's called a carnet de passage, and it's a guarantee that you will bring back your motorcycle to the country of origin. And you particularly need this carnet de passage in Egypt, where otherwise you have to pay a lot of money in order to import your motorcycle. And then there's the third route, which is through Western Africa along the Ivory Coast. And this is rather an expert route, I would say. It goes through a lot of countries where you have to speak French in order to communicate, so you have to be fluent in French. The security situation is not always that clear, and a lot of things can change very rapidly. So Western Coast is rather experienced level, but it is a lot of fun to do as well. And it is also a route less traveled, so if you have problems along the way, there will be not that many travelers who can help you. The locals might not be that used to travelers, and to particularly motorcycle travelers along the way. And there's also less experience and knowledge that you can build on and then that you can use in order to plan your own trip. So the west coast of Africa is very beautiful as well, very scenic. It is definitely on the list of routes that I want to do in my life, but a little bit later on, and particularly with a travel partner. I would not recommend doing the west coast alone. I met people who did it, but if you are, as I said, not fluent in French, you will have a hard time, particularly at the northern part of the west coast, where nobody really speaks English. So what I heard is that you can feel very alone if you cannot communicate with the locals. And then there's the fourth route that I talked about, but this is rather hardcore and not recommended route at all. It is straight through the middle of Africa, through the Democratic Republic of Congo, Chad, the Sahara and so on. It is rather a suicide mission, but if you really want to do it, you might be able to, pull it off. So good for you. And as I said, I decided on doing the east coast of Africa, the second trip I mentioned, and I did some preparation for it, and I would like to share with you what I've done so far. And the most important thing, next to like checking visa requirements, getting vaccinations and all these kind of things, was to plan my route. And next to Google Maps, obviously, I used a website called Horizons Unlimited. This is a really well-known website or forum for travelers, for overlanders and so on, who share their experiences and who also answer all your questions you might have. And with me, I particularly had questions about how to get to Africa from Europe. Since the Arab Spring Revolution and the Syrian War, it is very hard to get from Europe to Africa by boat, for example. So there used to be some ferries from Sicily to Tunisia or Libya, I think, and then you could drive to Egypt and from then you could go down. But now these ferries don't exist anymore because Libya and Tunisia are not safe countries to travel to anymore. So I took to Horizons Unlimited and I asked the people there, and I got an answer that it would be possible to simply ship your motorcycle from Rotterdam or the Netherlands in general to Egypt, to Alexandria. And they listed a couple of shipping companies there, and eventually I was able to find one that would ship my motorcycle to Egypt. And now that I knew how to get my motorcycle to Egypt, I want to know which routes I can take from Egypt down. And there's an app that's very handy for this, which is called Treks for Africa. I will also link to it in the description below. I'm also not sponsored by any of these websites or app, I just recommend it to you now because I think they're very useful. So Treks for Africa is good for two things. One of them is finding these small little roads off the beaten track that you want to travel if you have a motorcycle. So it also shows you obviously the highways and the big roads you need to really get somewhere, but then next to it also shows you these small gravel roads and off-road roads that you can take to really explore Africa even better. And it uses collective knowledge from all the travelers that have gone through Africa or have traveled through Africa before, and it collects this knowledge and experiences and puts it on the map. And the second thing that Treks for Africa gives you is an overview of hostels and hotels and all these accommodation things you need if you're on the road. So it has a nice list of all the hostels and hotels along the way, together with their pricing. So it really lets you organize your trip along the way. So I'm gonna use Treks for Africa for traveling and for planning my day-to-day trips. And then I also have one device that I can really recommend if you do such a trip, and it's called a spot tracker. And the small little device is a little bit costly, but it might save your life one day. Because with one click you can call the emergencies without having to actually call them. It's just one click and somebody will come to help you. So if you have a motorcycle accident or anything else, somewhere in Africa, somebody will come and help you out. And I bought this just for my own security, and that I know that if anything happens, I can just press a button and somebody will take me out of there. So these three things, Horizons Unlimited, the Spot Tracker and Treks for Africa, I would like to recommend to you if you want to do a trip through Africa as well. And I also obviously planned my budget, and for that I also again used Horizons Unlimited, that has a nice list of how much money you might need in which parts of the world. And for Africa they listed around $20 per day. Now this fluctuates always a little bit. It depends on whether you have to pay import taxes, whether you're there with a motorcycle or a car, or whether you're just backpacking. But around $20 or $30 per day is a very good budget per day if you travel through Africa. But also if you want to travel anywhere else in the world, Horizons Unlimited got you covered. Again, I'm not paid by them to recommend this to you, but I'm just recommending it because it's a very good website and a very helpful website. So those have been parts of my preparations. Obviously there are things like visas and vaccines and these kind of things, but this is something rather standard that you won't have problems finding out. So the most important things are how you will get from A to B in Africa. Will you have your motorcycle or your car, or will you take a bus? These kind of things. Maybe also a push bike. I met people on push bikes. Might be a lot of fun. And then the second thing is really preparing and organizing your trip. And for that, again, you can use Horizons Unlimited or Treks for Africa, or just plain simple Google Maps. And I would also recommend you to set yourself a little time frame for this. So particularly with your budget. So if you have a time frame of 3 months, that you then calculate how much you need for these 3 months, and that you have that on your account plus some extra money. What unfortunately happens to some travelers who start off traveling is that they're traveling too long and then they run out of money, and they're in the middle of somewhere in Africa, for example, and they have to take a very expensive flight back. And if they would have planned better, then they could have gone further on these kind of things. So really plan your trip, also financially. Now, one last thing I would like to recommend is a website called Workaway. Again, I don't get paid for recommending them, But it's particularly interesting for people who want to do work and travel in Africa, for example. So Workaway is a website where individuals can put their project on it and they can ask for volunteers to come around and help them. This is on a private basis, so but normally there aren't commercial companies on there who make you pay for your volunteering experiences, which is a terrible thing, but which unfortunately happens in Africa, that you have to pay like 1,000 or 2,000 euros or $1 per month in order to help in a school or something. No, these projects, they are mostly run by individuals or smaller NGOs, and they really need people to help them with their project. And these people then put the project on Workaway, where people like you, for example, can apply to, and then for a little money that only covers your own living costs, you can go there and help these people out. I did that 2 years ago when I went to Kolocha as a teacher. I paid maybe $100 a week in order to cover my food and accommodation expenses, and that was it. And otherwise, I was just a teacher in the school and I could help out there a little bit. So Workaway, I will also link to it in the description below, is a very good website if you want to start off with work and travel in Africa. And then one last thing I would like to recommend to you if you go to Africa is a camera. Really, when I went to Africa, I wasn't into photography or videography, anything like that really before, but when I went there, the nature was so beautiful that I just had to start taking pictures of it. So if you can, maybe buy yourself a little camera that can take decent pictures, and then if you're there, you won't bite yourself in the ass because you haven't bought it. So this is it for today. I tried to cover some of my preparations for this trip, and I recommended a couple of websites and gadgets and apps to you, and I hope it helps you further. Otherwise, if you like this video, subscribe to this channel and like this video, I guess, and you will be notified about any upcoming videos. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.